Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we've got my friend Geordy Murphy, who's going to show you what it takes to build a tech company. It is not easy. He's going to talk about it. It's not, it's not for the faint of heart. If you're going to build a company, it takes something. And Geordy's going to talk to you all about that today. Geordy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be here.
Build a tech company. Is it easy?
No, it's not. I would say that you need ice water in your veins to do it because you have sleepless nights. You're constantly out trying to raise money. No matter what your sales are, that's never enough. So it's just a constant grind, and you just got to be prepared for it because that's what life is. When you jump into it, especially when you start off like I did when I tried to finance it myself. I got it to a certain point, and then all of a sudden you need to start raising money. And it's not that easy.
Well, especially, nobody taught you when you were in school. There wasn't like math, English, and raising funds. There wasn't like a little course you took in elementary school or middle school about how to raise money for a business. There was did anybody pull you aside to teach you how to do that?
No, not at all. But you learn you learn some things along the way. I mean, if you know a group, say, that might be interested, you don't go to them first. You go to the little guy first and get all the mistakes out of the way first, because they're going to ask you questions that you're not going to have answers for. So you don't want the guy that could potentially finance the whole thing for you to be asking those questions when you don't have the answers for them. So you practice on, some little guys that would invest small amounts of money before you go to see the big guys that are, potentially going to finance the whole thing.
Well, I think that's a big part of growing yourself as an entrepreneur, right? I mean, there is no part of those little steps, those little bit, go to that little guy first, go to the little investor first, go to the you're not quite qualified to go to the big investor, like you said, right? You're not, especially when you're growing a business, especially when you have, you can go backwards and look at the small employees you hire, right? I mean, sometimes when you're just starting out, you don't know how to hire the top gun of the top gun. Sometimes you hire your buddy or a friend or somebody to get in business. You just don't know how to hire the top guns. You go to open a restaurant, you might not hire the top chef, someone who could run the kitchen without you, right? Sometimes you hire some people and you and them, and you rub two sticks together and you figure it out, but you're kind of not qualified yet to get there. And that's one of the hardest parts about business is understanding that, taking that leap from what I don't know, right, to what I know, and going through those little steps that maybe some of those steps are, pecking your way out of a shell, which makes it possible for you to fly later on.
But typically you only have a finite amount of time because you're going to have so much runway. And what do you do if you have a great product that people like or use, but you don't have enough runway to get it to the next level to talk to the investors that are going to invest at the next level? Because the whole thing is it's a tier game, especially in the SaaS model business. You got to get it to $1 million, with angel investors or by yourself or whoever. Then you can talk to some private equity guys or VC guys that, they'll come in at $1 million. Then you got to get it to 5 million. And it's just a constant game of stepping it up where the larger money comes in. So you have to be prepared for that, but you need enough runway to get to the first level. And that sometimes is difficult because you run into, like you just mentioned, what if you hire the wrong VP of sales or, the wrong, marketing person or the wrong tech guy? You only have so much time to fix it because you have a finite amount of funds. And you can't keep going back to the well, especially the initial well that you have. So it's an interesting dilemma. But it's fun also. I mean, especially if you have to believe in what you're doing. And that's the key to it. And you have to have something like what started me off was I was cycling one day and listening to Steve Jobs' book. And there was a comment that if you can identify a problem and solve that problem, you have an opportunity. And in the restaurant industry, the problem is that it's a rear view mirror business. People operate for a month and they turn around and say, did we make money? Well, in today's times, especially as difficult as the restaurant business has gotten, from the labor to the cost of goods to everything, commodity, everything's gone up. So, and then you're going to operate for a month and then wait another 10 days to see how you did. Well, that just doesn't work anymore. So that's where Phobesoft, food and beverage software, comes in because we give restaurants a daily profit and loss statement compared to a budget. So they have a baseline. They know where they should be. You're not flying by the seat of your pants thinking, oh gosh, well, look, sales look pretty good this month. Well, you don't know that they're down, 20% from last year. But when you operate with a budget and you see it every single day, it gives you the information to make decisions to manage to the bottom line. And that is the key. That's what we feel, identifying that problem. And that's how we have solved that problem. And we're helping hundreds and hundreds of restaurants become more profitable and at least get the information that they have. So, I mean, it's working. It's pretty cool.
Well, I think you got to go back. Your driving principles got to be the why. Look, I know that restaurateurs are suffering because finding out a month after I spent the money that I'm over budget, I'm upside down, too big of a hole to get out of. So you know that, right? You've been there. You've operated restaurants. I remember you telling me about some of your restaurants where Robin Williams used to come in. I used to love that story. That's a great one, right? Look,
Robin would come in, but when I had Geordy's restaurant in San Francisco, which was my namesake, we were top 10 best new restaurants in the country by Esquire magazine, Food and Wine, Bon Appetit, New York Times, the whole list. And Robin was in one night. Should I tell the story? Do you want to hear the story?
Yeah, tell the story.
So Robin was in one night with Marcia, his wife at the time, and they could come in a side door and not be noticed. We sit him down at a banquette. Because he's a shy guy. I don't know if, many people, everybody knows who he is or who he was. So the server comes over, not their server, but a server from across comes over to the desk and says, hey, Geordy, there's a bug crawling up the wall. And if the guy he could have grabbed a napkin and taken it off the wall and there'd be nothing, but it was directly across from Robin Williams. So all of a sudden, I look over there and some people are watching and this bug is crawling up the wall. Well, it gets almost to the ceiling and there's a vaulted light. So when it gets on the other side of the light, it's gone away. So, drama over. Well, no, the bug falls from the ceiling down onto the table in front of this lady. And she just, screams, bug, blah, blah, blah. So here I am, probably the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me in the restaurant. So I go over there, I'm buying 4 of them dinner, I'm apologizing, doing the whole 9 yards. The whole thing calms down. About a minute goes by, and Robin is sitting on the bench, and all of a sudden, you hear this, and he starts going under the table from the banquette and hops up on the other side and does like 3 or 4 minutes of stand-up. The whole restaurant is howling, laughing. I mean, it was absolutely, he just did an unbelievable job. The next day in the paper, Robin Williams performs at Geordy's restaurant in San Francisco, stand-up, ad-lib. Nothing about the bug or anything, which was nice. But he basically bailed me out of the most embarrassing situation that I'd ever had in the restaurant. It was something that I still remember to this day.
He's a solid human being, right? I mean, that's solid, right? As one of your customers, known you that long, and to be able to go there and diffuse that and support you that way,
it was really cool. It was really
cool. I mean, Geordy, that's one of those really cool moments where, in life you get to count on your hands how many times that happens. But that's amazing. That's awesome. So in this restaurant, you're feeling the pain. You've gone through the pain, right? I mean, a lot of us in business are there, right? We get to the end of a month and you're like, whew, I can't. Wow, darn it! It's already the information you get's too late, and you start to look at this and going, I can't operate this way. I need to be able to see these cost expenditures, my forecast for expenditures. I need to look at what my actual expenditures are on a current time basis, not a month after or 10 days after a month, right? At the close of the month and 10 days later they close. It's just too late, right? Exactly. So you realize you've got that Steve Jobs ring in your ear. Here's a problem. Let's go solve the problem. Now, how do you start to write this software?
Well, what I did was that day I got off my bike and went to, I have a company that I've had for 25 years called Cypress Hospitality Group. We're headhunters for the hospitality business. We find chefs, managers, etc. So I go to my office that day and I started making phone calls and I looked for a developer. Now, our developer, his name is Raj. He has a whole team of people in India. He lives in Jacksonville. I live at the beach in Jacksonville. So he lives here. We meet all the time. And I just started talking to him about how we go about doing it. We had a massive whiteboard in the office, and I just started, sketching out a profit and loss statement. And I had a rudimentary thing that I had built previously by myself, but not tech involved
Right.
at all. And
Here's what, here, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I don't mean to interrupt you, but here's what,
that's okay.
but I want the audience to see this. Look, this is where it's an idea, right? You're on a bike.
Right.
You get motivated by Steve Jobs. Hey,
Right.
you got a solution to solve. Now this idea in your head, right? If we could describe an idea, let's call it a light bulb, right? Let's call it a light, right? It's this light in your head right now. It's an idea. Now from there to bringing it into the physical world, right? You manifested that on a whiteboard, right? Like literally you're starting to take the idea and you got to communicate this idea to your developer, right? So now you start to whiteboard. I just want people to get this. Like all things we've ever seen that are man-made started as an idea in our head,
Right.
and then manifested in the physical world. And we're talking about this path, how to start to make that happen, right? So if you guys have an idea, right, the first thing we want to start do is start to lay it out, right? The more I can see the idea in the physical world, that's the goal here.
Yes, exactly. And you have to be able to explain to someone that's going to build it. This wouldn't have been possible if there wasn't the cloud. It became possible with the advent of the cloud. Otherwise, you'd have to have a bunch of servers, and it would have just been a lot more complicated. And once we started building it, it's, you start small. Let's build this that works. And then you start adding pieces to it. For instance, like, the program today needs basically 3 bits of information. What were your sales for the day? What were your front of house and back of the house labor spends for the day? Because all the salaries and the workman's comp and payroll taxes are built behind the scene. And then what did you spend today for anywhere from your costs of goods, your food, beer, wine, liquor, to your, china, glass, and silver, soap, etc. So initially we built it, and all these had to be entered into the program. Well, that deterred a lot of people right there. It's like, here's a person, and this is, when I started this, I thought, we can do this. Well, I wanted to be like the KPMG for restaurants, where there's 800,000 restaurants in the country, and someone, a lot of them are just barely making it. Well, you have a person in there that's busting their rear every single day, and they're in those 4 walls, and they might have issues or problems or whatever, and they don't know who to call. There's not somebody, 911, hey, my food cost is high. What do I do? So our whole support team is all ex-restaurant people. And these guys, the host and girls, they can answer pretty much any question and help. That's what we do, because Phobesoft, it's either red or green. And if it turns red, that means you have opportunity. And a little bullion pops up to say it's your liquor cost. Well, have you, are you measuring what you're pouring, et cetera? And, it gives you 30 suggestions on how to bring your costs down. But that's the key, is not only are we giving you the information, we're also helping you with solutions to increase your profit. And to get back to what I was saying a minute ago, a lot of these people, a lot of them are, $1 million to $3 or $4 million businesses. And a lot of them inside don't spend 15, 20 minutes a day looking at the financial piece of the business. They feel, some people out there feel, it's customers. What's my menu going to look like? What are my dish? A lot of people will come up with dishes and they don't know what the cost of goods on that dish is. It could be a wild seller.
Well, Geordy, I don't need to do that. Geordy, I just make dishes and look, as long as they're good, I can just put them on the menu and I'll make money.
Yeah, well, look what, what was it, that issue, that limited time offer that Red Lobster did? All you could eat shrimp, they put them out of business. It basically bankrupted the company.
That's right.
Right. So, that's on a massive scale. But think about it. You have a lot of chefs out there that, it's not their fault. Nobody's taught a lot of these people this stuff. It's not like,
No one pulls them
hey,
aside.
running a
Yeah.
restaurant 101. Um, and that's especially today in the industry. Back in the day, if you say wanted to get in the hotel business, you went to work for Hyatt. They didn't pay you squat, but you work for Hyatt for 2 years. Any hotel company is going to offer you a job and basically double your pay. Well, in the restaurant industry today, nobody's teaching these, restaurateurs and future restaurateurs the finances of the business and how to become an operator. We have a client about 6 months ago said, not only did you increase the profit in my restaurant, you turned my manager into an operator. Now what's the difference? Well, the manager is the guy that's going to come in, unlock the door, count the money, put it in the drawer, run the business, count the money back, put it in the safe, lock the door, and go home. Whereas an operator is going to come in and he's going to notice, hey, maybe I'm $5 short on the drawer. I wonder how that happened. He's going to start thinking about this stuff. He's going to look at, what are the people coming in? How many servers do I have? Are they standing around before all the customers start coming in? Can I cut an hour of labor here? Or maybe I need to add an hour of labor because people are coming in, sooner. But a lot of restaurateurs don't understand that. Let's say that you close at the end of the night, you've got the assistant manager, and it's been a long day. So there's 3 or 4 servers sitting around, they're having a beer. Well, they're still on the clock. And that, if you save an hour a day in the front of the house and an hour a day in the back of the house, you're going to save $14,000 to $18,000 a year. That's huge. And it's just an hour in the kitchen and an hour in the front of the house. I mean, it could pay rent for 2 or 3 months on some of these restaurants, if
That's
not
right.
more.
That's right.
And that's what you have to watch. It's a business of pennies. And because there's so many different categories. And that's what we do too, is we help organize the restaurateur to where all this stuff is basically hits them. It's red or green.
I think that's what we want to look at, right? Look, idea, owning a restaurant, right? Growing the idea, a financially successful restaurant, right? Now, all the steps between here and there, right, are that's the hard part, right? Walking through the broken glass to grow a financially successful restaurant. Now, what you guys have done is you've taken a lot of that part out of the game. You've taken a lot of that, you've put a solution in place where they can see it faster, quicker, right? Where you're literally, red or green tiles. You can scan your finances all day long, and you can look at opportunity. Oh, look, there's a red part. Oh, let's go dive into that, and not have to focus on the rest of the part of it.
Exactly. And what we've done now is, when we took it from stage one, when I had financed it myself up to this point, we found the small angel fund out of Winter Park, Florida. And now what we do is we import food, beer, wine, liquor sales from the point of sale system. We import, the front of house and back of the house labor. We have EDI connections with every major broadliner, Cisco, US Foods, Benny, Keith, etc. So when the invoice hits the restaurant, the invoice hits us. We also, if you have the fish guy that writes 10 pounds of ahi tuna on a napkin, you can take a picture of that with your phone. Well, it happens.
It happens. I get it.
Yeah.
And what sucks about it happens all day, randomly throughout, especially on the smaller restaurants. The little guys, you get the little vendors, they show up and they literally walk in and they hand you that napkin and walk out, and you're in the middle of a rush, right? They'll do it at lunch, right in the middle of right your busiest hour of the day, and you're trying to figure it out. It's just a lot, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, though, is that we're doing this for restaurants, and they barely have to touch a thing.
Yeah.
If they spend 5 or 10 minutes a day, and they need to think about 5 or 10 minutes a day on my financials for a business, 1 to 5 or 6 million, whatever it is, that's not that much time if you really think about it. And it's going to give them the insight. They're going to have the information there, and it teaches them how to, manage to the bottom line. And that's the term we use, and that's what we help the restaurant industry do.
Well, so now I want to go back a little bit about your journey in creating the software, because, there is 1,000 or maybe even 1,000,000 things that your software can do, right? If there's 1,000,000 things that we can do, right, you got to get to a minimum viable product, right? So how do you figure that out? How do you figure out what's my minimum viable product? What do you focus on to get from here to generating revenue to start getting it somewhat sustainable?
Well, what we did that, like I mentioned previously, initially we got it to where it was a daily profit and loss statement next to a budget that ran month to day, and that was it. I mean, and it was all physical entry. You had to enter your invoices, you had to enter your food, beer, wine, liquor, etc. Now it's all imported and EDI connections, and we built a piece of AI. Like I mentioned, you can take a picture of the invoice. Um, but now with technology, it's become a lot more streamlined. So the person doesn't need to spend as much time, but given that information, they should spend that much time analyzing what they have in front of them. And that's what's going to help them become more profitable. But to get it to that point, I mean, you make a lot of mistakes and such. We started bringing customers on and we got, 50, 60, 80, and it's happening. I mean, everybody saw value in it. And then boom, the pandemic hits. Poof.
Yeah, right, right.
I mean, every restaurant in the country closed. We lost every single customer. So then what do you do? It's like, do you continue? I mean, and as we know, the pandemic it took a minute to get over it. So, and that's when we found a small angel fund. So at that time, we started working on enhancing the technology because it never ends. Basically we just finished a really cool inventory program that ties into everything. Now we have one little other piece we're adding to it. And then for a while, it's just going to be maintenance. And that's when you can take pieces and enhance them a little bit more, make it simpler, make it quicker, make it faster, make it easier for the end user. And that's what we're getting to the point where we're doing right now. We're maintaining the product and trying to improve everything that we've done so far. And that's what I think people also need to do is sometimes you need to take a step back and say, okay, what do we have? Because you can't keep adding and adding and adding. You can, but you have to make sure that, stuff works.
Right. Get it dialed in,
years,
right?
But well, yeah, because over the years, I mean, you're enhancing and building, but you could also be upsetting some customers because what you've put out there, the new thing people get excited about, well, it's not quite done. We have a term. Is it done or is it done?
That's not right. No, right.
I mean, that's what it is because it's never really done. It's technology. I mean, look at, I made a comment a couple years ago and Raj quickly pointed out, I'm like, well, this might not work and this doesn't work. He said, do you know how many things a day happen to Microsoft? They have 30,000 plus mistakes that happen every single day. Can you imagine?
Well,
so one or two for me to
I think that's the hardest part for an entrepreneur to understand. For those of you guys that are out there and thinking, oh my God, I'm the only one that's messing up this bad. You're not. This is what you get paid for as an entrepreneur. Every idea, right? To grow the idea, you've got to be willing to walk through broken glass. If you don't walk
100%.
through broken glass and you're not willing to do that, go take a job with somebody else. Because the job of an entrepreneur is literally walking on broken glass every day and looking over the abyss and knowing that every single day things are going to go wrong. Nobody walks into your office and goes, hey, today I made another $100,000. No, they walk in and go, this is what's wrong. Here's what we messed up. Every company, every idea, software, construction, restaurants, hospital, anything that you're growing, right, is going to come with a level of walking through the broken glass. And the thought that you're the only one I think that's the hardest part to remember, is that it feels like I'm the only one ever going through this, right? Because I'm looking at my insides because I'm on the inside of a company, and I'm looking at your company's outside, and I can't see it, right? I don't see what they're going through, but just know they're going through exactly what you're going through. Nobody goes through business. Nobody goes through business. Nobody goes through, hey, hold on, can I say it one more time? Nobody goes through business unscathed.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I was told a week or two ago, I was speaking with a guy who's a CEO of a company, of a software company in New York, and he made the comment that to get it from an idea to where you actually have someone paying for the product is the most painful and most difficult thing there is to get to, because a lot of these ideas come out there and we see it every day from, this software company, this AI company, whatever, boom, boom, it just didn't get there. But if you can get to that point, you've accomplished something. And now it's just expanding your market. You might have to shrink your sales team or increase your support staff or do this or do that or whatever. But if you have a product that you have come up with, that you can get it to a point where there's actually someone that you're charging to use your product, you've accomplished a huge, huge task. And then from there, it's just growing it.
That's awesome. I look at my day-to-day activities. Yesterday I had my HR people in my office, and they're talking about just the people they're hiring and what she's working on, and the process here, just how we hire people, right? Do we want to bring them on early? Do we want to bring them on and give them lots of room to train, right? Do you carry that weight with them? Do you go, all right, do I bring an employee on early and spend a month or two getting them set up? Or do I bring someone on just in time to get a project started, and then all of a sudden they're drinking off a fire hose, and you get this new employee has to go through this rush? What's the right mentality? What's the way to look at our finances? I mean, that happens in every aspect of our business, right? Do we want to go take on bigger projects, right? Do we have the skill set to go do that? Every time you add on a portion of the business, how do you start to expand? But the next one is about organizing, right? Now I have to, every time I expand, I've got to organize, and that organize feels, it's frustrating a little bit, right? It's a little bit of, you got to work it out. You got to think it through. And by the way, as an entrepreneur, people ask me, how do you make these decisions? I'm like, look, I really get paid to make a decision, and most of the time I'll make them. And if I'm wrong, I just try to do it quickly as possible. And I try to find out if I'm wrong faster, right? And I make wrong decisions every single day. We make mistakes I mess things up all day, every day. And the thought that, you're not going to make mistakes is foolish. It's
Oh,
literally impossible if you're growing anything. Now, you want to sit on your couch and do nothing and pretend like you're flawless. Great, go for that. You're not going to get anything done. But to grow anything of style, to be able to sell your product to somebody else, right?
right.
Because every one of somebody else that you sell to, each one of them has a different opinion about how and what they want, don't they?
Oh, of course, of course. Everybody, it's funny. Yeah. Well, number one, to get back to what you just said, is you make a decision and you move on. It's the people that don't make the decision that get bogged down. I used to tell restaurant managers, because in the restaurant business, yeah, I mean, one of the restaurants I ran in San Francisco did $8 million. Another one did $12 million. So stuff is going crazy, right? I'm like, think of one or two, something happened. I could do this, like I could do that. Do one of them and move on. Now you can always go back and change it if it wasn't the right decision, but you've made a decision and you've moved on. It's the people that are out there that can't decide this or that, just like what you were talking about. I mean, make the decision, move on. If it's not, maybe not the right decision, you go back and change it. And then you can continue to move on. But you have to keep growing and you have to keep moving forward. Otherwise, you're somewhat stuck.
And those that can't transition through that mess, right? There's a propensity from all of us to go, that's too much. I can't do it. Let's go backwards. Slow down. Hey, by the way, I've been in business with partners who just couldn't take it anymore, and they made us slow down. And I'm telling you, that's just as bad. You've got to be able to transition through it. Now, you may say, well, small incremental growth will get you there. I can just tell you, the problem with small incremental growth is that although it sounds healthy, the problem is you go through these parts where you'll burn out before anything happens, right? You never get to some substantial volume or even profitability to a place where you can do it. Now, look, if you want to stay small, let's say you and I own a business and it's just the two of us have to feed each other. Great. You may stay that, but just remember, the two of us got to stay in business and the two of us got to do all the work forever. That's not really a company. You're not an entrepreneur. You're just buying yourself a job.
Well,
Right?
I saw an article. I saw an article years ago. I think it was '08 when the stock market went crazy or whatever and went down, and all these companies started pulling back. But there was a Harvard Business case study done years after that the companies at that point that spent more, they started marketing at that point. They put themselves so far ahead of the other groups that pulled back. So when things shifted, they were way down the road, and all these other people in the same industry had to turn around and scramble to try to catch up. So those are the things you need to think about also when things go sideways. It's like, what do I do? Do I pull back or do I keep heading forward?
Always head forward. Head
Right.
forward. Go through the barbed wire. Go through the broken glass. Don't stop
There's a
there.
guy growing up here in Florida and surfing, and I was lucky enough. I opened a restaurant for the Plaza Club or the Club Corp in Hawaii, and I got to surf the North Shore for a couple of years ago. But there was a surfer. His name was Terry Fitzgerald. He's from Australia, and he had a comment. There was a break in Australia that was so fast, and his comment was, "You got to go, go, go. You can't stop, and you can't look back." And that has stuck with me since I was 17 or 18 years old. And you just got to go, go, go. You can't stop and you can't look back. You just got to keep with your vision and keep running with it.
And
And
by the way, and the people that in places that go through this with you, there's a gift in it, right? It doesn't feel like that when you're there, right? There's some days I wake up and we're like, I don't need any more gifts, right? All these learning lessons in business, right? But every single one of them is a gift if we can stop and just notice that for a second, and just notice that there's a gift in all of the breakdown and all the places. There's people when we get frustrated, the gift is knowing that we're passionate about what we're doing. So I think that there's that's something to notice, something to look at, just to know that. Geordy, let me ask you this: if you're going to speak to that young, someone's getting ready to start their first restaurant, their first food cart, their first go at a restaurant, what's the first thing they should get a better understanding of their financial clarity with?
the financial clarity is one thing, but I think that if I was to give advice to a young person that was, say, going to get in the restaurant business or starts, I would say find a mentor. Find a person that's maybe been through it before. I'm not saying this person's knows everything or whatever, but you're going to run into situations where if it's your first rodeo, you might not know what to do. And to have a mentor or a person that can give you some advice or just someone to bounce things off of. I mean, well, I had an issue years and years ago in one of my restaurants, and I was a know-it-all. I was the mayor of Union Square in San Francisco. I ran the restaurants. I knew everything until I got my own four walls. And I ran into a couple of situations where I just did not know what to do. And, I go home and look in the mirror and go, what am I going to do? And I don't know. But I wish at that point, I would have had a mentor, someone to bounce things off of, because I understood the financials, but I didn't know what to do with a couple of situations in the financials.
Right. Not having any idea what does
Right.
what does that mean? Now,
Right.
how can next time I can make that smarter?
I was playing golf with the president of when I used to play golf. I'm a cyclist and a swimmer now, but with the president of Pizza Hut years ago. And we were walking down the fairway and he said, you know how independent restaurants go out of business? And I was like, how? And he snapped his fingers and he says, like that. Because these people, they get in the four walls and they're working their tail off, but it's they don't
They can't
know.
see
It's
it.
the
They
same
can't see
thing.
it.
They'll
Yeah.
do whatever they need to do, but they just don't know what to do. And
Right.
and
Right.
that's the key is
Right.
is to get advice and to have either a network or a mentor or a situation where you can get help when you need it.
Right.
or just advice. It could be the flip side. You can have something that's wildly successful. It's like, how do I grow it? What's my next step?
Having someone you can trust, I think, is a key piece right there, Jordy. Having that key trustable partner, first of all, that's away from you, right? Outside of the day-to-day activities, that can look at you and watch what you're doing with an eye of trust, right? Someone that's loving on you, someone that is there. They're not malevolent, they're not trying to take your business, they're not trying to, they're
Exactly.
there to help you figure that out. I think there's a gift in finding that mentor. That's great advice right there. So finding a great mentor or someone that can support you and see you and what you're doing with an eye that of experience that can guide you through some of that stuff. That's some great advice right there.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, I can tell you what, having you on the show is amazing. Watching what you guys are doing over at Phobesoft, say it right, Phobesoft.
Phobesoft.
Phobesoft. And if people want to get a hold of you and get your software and bring it to their restaurant, what's the best way for them to do that?
It's Phobesoft, Fobesoft.com, and you can book a demo on there. Or my email is geo@Fobesoft.com. Matthew, my partner, is just a wonderful guy. He runs the demos, and he shows people what we're doing, and he's just, another good thing to have a great partner. And I have a great partner in Matthew and Raj. Really, really helpful. But geo@Fobesoft.com or Phobesoft.com, and you can book a demo on there with Matthew.
Listen, folks, if you want to find a way to take 20 to 40% to your bottom line with software that's going to help you focus that attention on that, you got to get together with Geordy, and you got to look at his software. And we're going to put all that contact information down below, the website, his contact information. So excited about having you on. It's always a gift when you and I get to talk. You're just a plethora of information.
Cool. It was a pleasure, Anthony. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, hey, audience, last week we had another unbelievable amount of downloads with all of you guys, just breaking records, and it just blows me away. If you guys, but I noticed a lot of you guys made it to the end of a podcast. There was a YouTube group that was make it to the end of a podcast, and they weren't subscribers. Right? We had 20% of them were not subscribed. If you could take a second and like and subscribe and do that now, it just makes a world of difference to Alyssa and the team and Joe in the background. They work hard every day to bring this podcast to light. And those numbers help us get great guests like Geordy and bring these ideas to the surface. So if you could do that now, I'd be so grateful. As always, thanks for listening.